The pristine walls of my childhood bedroom still bore the marks of countless taped-up sketches, faint rectangles where my childish doodles had once hung before Dad insisted I take them down. Now, sitting on my old bed with my tablet in hand, I watched those same doodles shake the art world. Lot 47. The Christie's auctioneer's voice came through my live stream. Early work from the Neon Dreams collection. Opening bid at $20 million. My phone buzzed, probably another text from Mom asking why I wasn't at Sunday dinner. They still thought I was wasting time with those cartoons in my tiny studio apartment. 30 million. 45 million. 60 million. The bids flew higher as my animated art pieces, digitally enhanced versions of those bedroom sketches, glowed on the auction house's screens. Each piece told a story, the ones my family had dismissed as juvenile fantasies. Dad, I texted back, turn on channel 8. There's something you need to see. The auctioneer's voice rose with excitement. 80 million from the bidder in Shanghai. I could picture the scene downstairs. Mom setting out the roast she'd made to guilt me into coming home, Dad probably rehearsing another lecture about real careers and growing up. 85 million from the Metropolitan. My latest piece floated on the auction screen, a swirling constellation of animated characters and landscapes, each element hiding complex social commentary beneath its cartoon surface. The same style Dad had ordered me to grow out of when I was 16. 90 million. 95 million. The gavel fell. Sold. The complete Neon Dreams collection to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for $95 million. My phone exploded with notifications as the art world reacted. But I was only waiting for one call, the one from downstairs, where I knew Mom and Dad were watching their failed artist-daughter rewrite modern art history. The thundering of footsteps up the stairs told me they'd seen the broadcast. My bedroom door flew open, revealing Dad's flushed face and Mom's trembling hands still holding her wine glass. That was your art? Dad's voice cracked. Those glowing cartoon things. Animated neo-expressionist pieces. I corrected gently, watching another notification pop up on my tablet, the Louvre requesting a private showing. The same style you told me would never pay the bills. Mom's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor she'd always kept immaculate, afraid my art supplies might stain it. But you work in that little studio apartment, she stammered. You said you were doing illustrations for children's books. That's my day job, I smiled, pulling up more screens on my tablet. These are my real projects. Digital galleries materialized in the air, holograms of my worldwide exhibitions, each piece selling for millions. The Childish cartoons had evolved into a revolutionary art form, blending traditional animation with cutting-edge technology and social commentary. The Tokyo show last month, I continued, showing them footage of lines wrapping around the Mori Art Museum. The Paris retrospective coming up in spring. The permanent collection being installed at MoMA. Dad sank onto my bed, his eyes fixed on the streaming numbers from the auction. 95 million. For cartoons? For art that speaks to a generation raised on animation, I corrected. Art that hides complexity behind seeming simplicity. Like those sketches you made me take down. I gestured to the faint tape marks on the walls, ghosts of the artwork that had just sold for more than our entire neighborhood was worth. The college fund you refused to spend on art school? I pulled up my bank balance. I could buy the university now. The real job you insisted I get? My assistant handles those calls while I'm in my studio. Mom was still staring at the spilled wine, probably seeing the irony in how many times she'd scolded me for making messes with my art supplies. Why didn't you tell us? She whispered. I turned to the wall where my first major piece had once hung, the one Dad had called a waste of paper. Because you needed to see it like this, I said softly. On the world stage, validated by the very institutions you respected. Because if I'd told you 6 months ago that my cartoons were selling for millions, you wouldn't have believed me. My phone buzzed again, the Met's curator wanting to discuss the installation. On my tablet, the auction aftermarket was already pushing the collection's value past $100 million. All those hours you thought I was doodling, I continued, bringing up my design software, I was revolutionizing digital art. While you were worrying about me growing up, galleries were bidding for my work. Dad picked up one of my old sketchbooks, still sitting on the shelf where he'd banished it years ago. These drawings, they're worth millions now? The originals? I nodded. Probably 8 figures each. But I'm not selling them. Why not? I smiled, watching another notification pop up. Another museum, another 8-figure offer. Because some things are worth more than money. Like proving that childish dreams can change the art world. The next hour transformed my childhood bedroom into something between an art gallery and a corporate headquarters. My tablet projected holograms of my work across the walls, each piece now worth more than our house, while notifications from museums and collectors worldwide kept flooding in. This one, I said, enlarging a particularly complex piece, was inspired by the time you grounded me for drawing during math class. The artwork exploded into 3 dimensions, filling the room with swirling animated figures that told stories of restriction, rebellion, and ultimate freedom. Numbers and equations danced through the scene, transformed into characters that played out complex narratives. It sold for $12 million at Sotheby's, I added quietly. The mathematician who bought it said it helped him visualize string theory. Mom sat on my old desk chair, still shaking. But your little studio apartment, we visited last month. It was so basic. I pulled up the security feed from my basic studio. The simple room they'd seen was actually an anteroom, hiding a state-of-the-art digital art facility that occupied the entire top floor of the building. That's my actual studio, I explained, showing them the vast space filled with cutting-edge technology and works in progress. The small room is just where I meet people who still think I'm struggling. People like us, Dad said softly, watching as another piece sold in the ongoing auction's secondary market. The apartment you kept trying to help me upgrade from? I continued, pulling up the property deed. I own the building. Along with most of that block now. More notifications chimed, galleries in Dubai, Singapore, and London all requesting immediate meetings. The art world was exploding with news of my collection's record-breaking sale. But why keep it secret? Mom asked, finally finding her voice. Why let us think you were failing? I walked to my old closet, pulling out a worn portfolio. The one Dad had once called a waste of good leather. Because of this, I said, opening it to reveal my earliest sketches. Every time you dismissed these as childish, every lecture about real jobs, every comment about growing up, it all went into the art. The portfolio's contents came alive through my tablet's augmented reality display, each simple sketch transforming into the multi-million-dollar masterpieces they'd become. That cartoon cat you said was a waste of time? The sketch rose from the page, becoming a complex animated commentary on societal expectations that had sold for $20 million. Those silly doodles in my math notebook? Another transformation showing how I'd turned equations into art that now hung in tech billionaires' collections. Dad picked up an old permission slip, one he'd refused to sign for an art summer camp. All this time, while we were pushing you to be practical, I was building something revolutionary, I finished. Something that proved art doesn't have to follow traditional rules to be valuable. My phone buzzed again, this time with an alert that would shatter even the afternoon's previous records. Ms. Chin, my AI assistant's voice came through my tablet. The Vatican Museum's curator is on the line. They're interested in commissioning a permanent installation. Mom's hands flew to her mouth. The Vatican? Along with the Guggenheim, the Tate Modern, and... I checked the growing list. Apparently the Imperial House of Japan. Dad sat heavily on my old beanbag chair, the one he tried to throw out because it wasn't professional enough for a young adult's room. The commission fees, I continued, pulling up the offers, start at $50 million each. Though the Vatican's offering something more interesting than money. What could be more interesting than $50 million? Dad asked weakly. I expanded the Vatican's proposal in holographic form. They want me to reimagine the Sistine Chapel's ceiling for the digital age. A permanent fusion of Michelangelo's work with my childish cartoons. The room filled with my preliminary concepts, animated angels dancing through classical scenes, Renaissance figures transformed into living art that responded to viewers' movements. Those late nights you thought I was wasting time on my computer? I gestured to a particularly complex sequence. I was developing the technology that makes this possible. While you were worrying about my career, I was inventing new forms of artistic expression. Another notification chimed, the Met's installation team requesting technical specifications. On my tablet, I could see them preparing the entire wing that would house my collection. Your cousin Steven's law firm, Mom said suddenly. The one you refused to interview with. Just bought 3 pieces for their lobby, I nodded. Though they don't know they bought them from the disappointing niece who turned down their junior associate position. I pulled up the sales record. $28 million for pieces they thought came from an anonymous artist. The same art style they'd mocked when it filled my high school notebooks. The gallery opening next month, I continued, watching their expressions. The one you've been avoiding talking about because you thought it was another hobby project? What about it? Dad asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be what he expected. It's not just a gallery. I activated the full architectural plans. I bought the old art school that rejected me. Transformed it into a digital art museum and education center. The same school that said my style was too unconventional will now teach courses based on my techniques. The holographic display showed the massive complex 30 stories of cutting-edge art technology and educational spaces, all dedicated to nurturing the kind of creativity my parents had tried to discourage. The opening gala, I added quietly, has a waiting list of collectors and celebrities willing to pay $1 million per ticket. Though I've reserved front row seats for you free of charge. Mom's eyes welled with tears. Oh honey, we were so wrong. You weren't wrong, I said, watching another piece sell for 8 figures. You were just looking at art through an old lens. The same way the traditional galleries did until my cartoons started selling for more than their classical collections. The setting sun cast long shadows through my bedroom window, creating interesting patterns that danced with the holograms of my artwork. The Christie's auction was entering its final phase, with my smaller pieces now selling for prices that made even the earlier millions seem modest. There's something else you should see, I said, activating a hidden feature in my tablet. The entire room transformed, becoming a virtual gallery of my journey. This is what I've been building while you thought I was struggling. Every wall showed a different phase of my career. The early rejections from traditional galleries, the first digital experiments, the moment when the art world finally realized that cartoons could carry deeper meaning than classical paintings. That summer internship I turned down at the bank, I began pulling up a particular piece. I was actually in Tokyo creating this. The artwork materialized in the center of the room, a swirling vortex of animated characters that told the story of financial systems collapsing and rebuilding in new forms. It had sold for $30 million to a banking consortium that now used it to train AI systems. And that Christmas dinner I missed? Another piece appeared. I was installing this at the Louvre. Mom sank deeper into her chair as she watched the progression of my success. Each piece worth more than their entire life savings, each installation more prestigious than the last. But your apartment, Dad started again, still struggling with the disconnect, is actually the top 3 floors of the building. I finished, showing them the true floor plans. The small studio you saw is where I meet with people who need to think I'm still a struggling artist. It helps keep things interesting. My phone buzzed again, this time with news that would reshape the entire art world. Ms. Chin, my AI assistant, announced, the final numbers from today's auction are in. With secondary market sales and commission offers, your total valuation has exceeded $1 billion. The room went silent except for the soft hum of my tablet's projectors. $1 billion. Mom whispered. That's just the current market value, I explained, pulling up the financial data. The futures market is predicting it will triple by next year. Dad stood up suddenly, walking to the wall where he'd once hung a poster of practical career choices, over my drawings. All those times we said you were wasting your talent, he said quietly. We were the ones who couldn't see. I brought up another piece, one I'd never shown in galleries. It was a digital recreation of my childhood bedroom, every sketch and doodle preserved exactly as it had been before they made me take them down. This one's not for sale, I said softly. Some art needs to stay personal. The room filled with animated memories. Younger versions of myself drawing late into the night, dreams taking shape in what they dismissed as cartoons, hope surviving every criticism and doubt. The gallery opening next month, I continued, isn't just about showing art. It's about changing how we define value. Every kid who's been told their dreams are childish will have a place to learn, create, and prove the critics wrong. A new alert flashed across my tablet, the final piece of my plan falling into place. The old art school building, I said, pulling up live construction feeds, isn't just becoming a gallery. I'm turning it into the world's first digital arts academy. Full scholarships for students whose families think their art is just cartoons. Mom wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the plans unfold, a massive complex dedicated to nurturing the very creativity they tried to suppress in me. And the first exhibition? I smiled, watching their expressions. Will be called Childish Dreams, featuring my earliest sketches alongside their multi-million-dollar evolved forms. Every dismissive comment, every criticism, transformed into proof that art doesn't need to be traditional to be valuable. Dad touched one of the faint tape marks on the wall where my drawings had once hung. "We were so wrong," he whispered. "No," I corrected gently as another notification announced another 8-figure sale. "You were just looking at art through an old frame." Sometimes the most valuable masterpieces start as simple sketches in a child's bedroom. Outside, I could hear reporters gathering, the art world's media finally tracking down the mysterious artist who just shattered every pricing record in modern history. But for now I let them wait.